Well, hello guys, and welcome once more to our channel. What I would like to do today is really just show you how to more or less deploy resources to the Azure Cloud. And in this tutorial, would basically deploy an Azure function, and then we can more or less begin to understand how to automate the deployment process of resources to the cloud. And this is going to be a continuation of a video we did in the past, which was more or less us building an Azure function in Rust and then deploying this to the Azure cloud. If you look over here, I have an HTTP server already. I can do cargo run, and we can go to this endpoint. I'll use curl to quickly go to this endpoint to localhost 3000, and I'll go to API/health. And then this will of course trigger this endpoint. And what I've done more or less is, if you look in here in main, there should be an endpoint called health, which should be over here. And then the logic of course is in here. So if we go to utils and then go to API, we can see index. So we get this message, your API, this HTTP was triggered successfully, and this is also what we got down here. And then of course, as the information says, if we come over here and pass name and say, I say like Tony, and then it says hello Tony, which is of course more or less what is over here, nothing special. Again, I already did a video in the past explaining how to more or less set this all up, and just in case you were wondering, this is an HTTP server in Rust written with the Warp framework. I'll add a link to this framework if you would want to check it out. I'll also add a link to the video that I did in the past explaining how to actually set this up from start to finish. But what I would really want us to focus on today would more or less be to deploy this function to the Azure cloud using Terraform and then test it out to see if it's working as expected. And so of course now we can more or less confirm that our function works locally. And I will just stop the server here. At least we are pretty sure it works. What we can quickly do is try to run this as an Azure function, and I can quickly say func start and to see if everything works, and everything seems to work, but then we got an error. Oh, okay, yeah. So over here in host.json, I added that the default executable path should be this in the root, but of course that is missing. So I can quickly just stop this, and then I copy. This should be in target, in debug, and then it's called edge. Skin that copy it to the root, and now we have it in the root. And then I can say func start one more time, and we should not be able to get that error again. And then again we can say curl this before. The only difference now is our Azure function is running at port 7071, and this should still be fine. So again, this is no longer we are not interacting with our Warp server anymore, but we are interacting to it through our Azure runtime. So pretty much very straightforward. This is working. So what I can just stop this and then maybe close this so we have a lot of room. So but what I would want us to do now more or less is to set this up in such a way that we can deploy it as an Azure function. Pretty straightforward. And to do that, I will just create a folder here. I don't want to search, I want to create a folder, so I collapse all of this. And I'll create a folder in the roots, and I can call this maybe function. And what I want to do is maybe I'll copy all these files. So again, these files are more or less what we use to define the endpoints that would be available to our function. So we have one, for example, like what we just visited is API health, and inside of this is simply a single JSON file called function.json, and it just defines some parameters with which Azure knows how to bind our functions to our path. So here the auth level is anonymous, and what it means is I'm letting my function decide however it wants to handle authentication. I'm not doing anything, let's say on the Azure side, maybe using the Active Directory as the case may be. And then the direction of course would be in, the name is API health, the route is /health, and then the methods are get an option, and pretty straightforward. Of course, this can get more but this is really more or less what we have for now. And again, that's what we have in all of these files over here. They're just files with folders with a file inside called function JSON defining a particular route in our server. That's just pretty straightforward. And of course, for our function to be complete, I would like to move all of this. So host JSON, local settings, and this executable. I'll move all of this into this folder called function. And what it means is that this is all we need to run this function as an Azure function. Again, if you look down here, you will see our function logic. We have everything blah 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 all set up, and we use this, of course, we want to run this locally. And then in here, of course, would be where our binary and all of that will be contained. But more or less for our function to run, I can quickly also show you. If I cd into functions, I can still say func start, and everything should still be fine. And if you visit this endpoint one more time, it should be fine. So the point is more or less to let you know that for our function to run as an Azure function, everything we need for this function is in here. Again, the definition of our paths, host JSON, local settings.json, and of course the executable. Again, I'm building my I'm more or less working currently in Windows, so that's why my binary here is an executable. Of course, with Windows, with Linux or Mac or whatever, it's going to be different, but the process stays the same actually. So again, everything we need to deploy our function is inside the function folder. And now what I would want us to do, pretty straightforward, would be to set up how we can deploy our function using Terraform. And for that, I will create a folder called function Rust. And in here, I will define 3 files. So this is going to be our module to deploy Rust functions to Azure. That's really the whole point. And in here, I'll create a file called main.tf. I'll create another one called variables.tf. And then I'll create one last one, and this would be outputs.tf. And of course, if you want this to be an actual module, you can also add a readme, and that people can read to or more or less understand how to use your module. But let's move forward. Again, we're trying to structure this in such a way that we can reuse it. If we want to deploy 8,000 Azure functions, for example, we can do all of that using one module. And again, this model, I'm going to really keep it as simple as possible. I don't see the need for us to make it so complicated, but I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible, and so we can use it to deploy what we want to deploy. And so the first thing I might want to do more or less is to define the variables. I think that's would be necessary to use our module. And maybe I can make this a little bit smaller so we have a lot of room. So I need to create a variable. The first one I would want to create here will be called location. It's going to be of type string, and I can give it a description. So this would be the Azure region to deploy resource to, something like this. And the next variable I would like to provide to this resource will be a function name. Again, it's also going to be a string, and I'm just going to keep it simple for now. And or maybe I can add. Okay, we'll get back to this anyways. But let's continue. I would want to create one called prefix. This is going to help me to more or less group my resources, so that if they have certain prefix, I can already tell where they belong to. It's going to be of type string. And for the description, I can say the prefix which would be used to identify resources belonging together, something like this. And I would want to create a new one. I'll call this environment. So this would be the environments where I'm deploying my resource to, and this is going to be again a string. So this could be like stage, dev, prod, whatever the case may be. I want to create another one called resource group name. So the resource group is going to be like the container that's going to allow us to group the resources belonging to our application together. So for everything, let's say we have an application that have, I don't know, 10 databases, blah blah blah, servers and everything, Docker containers, whatever, and they are all belonging to the same, like offering the same application. We can actually have them all live within the same resource group, because again, it also helps to make it a lot easier to manage. So this will be the resource group name. And what else do I want to do? So yes, I want to provide the function. I call this function source code path, and this would allow me to provide the path where my function folder is, so I can zip it all together and deploy it. And another one would be, I would like to provide one called app settings. So this will also allow me to provide things like environment variables, as the case may be. So it's going to be a map, and I can provide a default, and I can call this environment, and I can call this test for now, something like this. And yeah, I think this should be fine. And so this is really important, the function name. I would like to add some more information over here. So I would like to provide a condition. Did I type that right? So yeah, sorry, I have to provide a validation block. Another validation block, I have to provide a condition. So the condition would be, because of course with Azure there are certain conditions that needs to be obeyed when you are giving a function a name, and that's also what I want to replicate it, so we don't waste our time. So it can only contain alphanumeric characters, and of course with numbers, and that's it. And it cannot be more than 24 characters. So that's what I would want to replicate here. So here what I would want to do is to use this regex function that Terraform offers, and I will provide so here I can add my regex. So I would take A to Z all low, and of course the numbers, and of course I don't want the numbers to be the end, so that's why I want to have it in between. And other than that, I can also have alphabetical characters in the capital letters as well. And I close that up. And no, yes, that's what I want. And of course this would be my function name, and so this will be one of my conditions. And the next condition will also be that I'll use the length function that Terraform also provides to calculate the length of this variable. So I say that this length is also called function name should be less than or equal to 24, and I provide some error message, and what I can say here is invalid value provided for function name. You can really actually add here like some information that's actually more or less an error message that can actually tell you what's going on. So here we can say it should be alphanumeric. Yes, alphanumeric. And I'll say let's keep it simple, alphanumeric only, something like this. That's it. So we try to do some validation so that when you try to use this module and you provide this value, if it doesn't meet these requirements, we simply error out, and this is the error message we print to the terminal. Pretty straightforward. So that should be all for our variables. And now we move over to our main.tf, and here I just want to define some resources that we'll be needing. So again, like I said, the container will be our resource group. So here our resource would be Azure Resource Manager, and from the Resource Manager we need resource group, which is one, and we have to give it a name. So I can simply call it Easy Dev Resource Group, like this. And there are two really important things we have to provide. One will be the name. So this name we'll get it from our what we defined. And the next one will be our location. This will also come from location. So this would take them from like what we defined over here. That was the essence of actually defining this initially. So with this, we've created our resource group. The next thing we'd want to create, of course, would be storage account. So this will help us to store files that pertain to our Azure function. For now, that will be the only thing that will be contained in our Azure function anyways, in our resource group. So that would be more or less the only thing needing this storage account. So that was not what I wanted. Storage account, yeah, this one. And I also have to give it this a name. I can simply call it storage account. That's fine. And again, key important things that we have to provide will be the name, and I'll try to append this to our function name just to make it kind of like unique. So this will be function name, and here I can just provide store. So our function name plus store would be the name of the storage account. So resource group name again would take it from what we created over here. So this will be Azure, this one, and then we need the name. And again, location, we'll still do the same. The location, and of course the next important one will be our accounts tier. And for this, I'm just going to use the standard account tier. And for a replication type, I'm also going to keep this quite simple. I'll need LRS. And of course, we made a mistake. We needed here the location. And that would be more or less all we need. And so of course we have our account tier and our account replication, type, and that would more or less be all we need, the basics at least that we need for our storage account. The next thing the next resource would need to create would be we need to create some application insights that's going to help us, of course, have insights to our resource. So again, we get this from our resource manager, application insights, and I can just keep it simple. Again, I can also call this application insights like this. And again, it's also going to be pretty straightforward. I'll take the name again like we did here. So I can quickly just copy this one, put it here. The only thing is I change this now to insights like this, and location again will come from this, and then location, and the next thing of course will be our resource group name. So again, this will come from this, and we have a name attribute. And application type, I'm just gonna leave this for now as web. So now these are more or less some of the things we need for our function. Now, of course, we now need to create our service plan. So the service plan more or less is gonna tell us or provide information that pertains to the runtime of our function. And again, I'm going to really keep this quite straightforward and spare you more or less, of course, the really important, the really difficult aspects. But of course, in the future, I hope to make a comprehensive video regarding how to work with Terraform, if there are enough people who are much interested in this. And again, I provide this again, and I also make this unique, generic, more or less. So this will be service plan. Again, we have location, exactly like we did over here. Location and the resource group name. This will be our resource group name, and then we need to say the OS type. I want this to be Windows, and SKU name, this would be Y1. So our function, of course, we can actually deploy multiple functions within the same service plan. It doesn't really matter, but for our own scenario, it's okay to just have one. It's totally fine. So now to the really important thing, this would be our Azure Windows function. So Azure Windows function app, and we can just call it maybe custom handler, because again it's going to have a custom runtime. So this will actually be used to deploy our Azure functions in, say, Rust or Go, whichever one we find quite interesting. So of course the name of our function, we'll get it from our function name. Again, resource group name, this will come from the one we created over there, and location from this one as well. And what else? So now we also need to provide, of course, quite important information like storage account name. This will come from our storage account, which is this one. Storage account, and then name, and storage account access key, because of course our function needs to have permissions to access the storage accounts that we created over there. And here we'll provide the primary access key and service plan ID. This will come from our service plan, and we provide the ID. And I would like to add a few couple of features. So HTTP only, and app settings. I will just add couple things. So apart from what is provided, I would also like to add a few things to this. So I will use the merge function, and in here I would like to provide the application instrumentation key, and this can of course come from our application insights. If I can type application insights, and let's see first. So let's add this sites config, so we can get rid of all of these errors. So from our application insights, we need the one we created over there. I think we called it application insights, and then it has instrumentation key. And so we merge this with what was provided, app settings, and that should be fine. Now of course I need to provide a couple more informations here, so I will like to add a couple more things like our function extension version. I would like to use of course function version 4, and again I would like to provide the path to more or less where our function is deployed. For now I'll leave this as an empty string. We'll get back to this in a minute. And now of course we need to set up our site config. So I would like to provide our application insights connection string. This will come from our application insights, and we have connection string like this, and then we have application insights key, and we can again get this from this. This will be our instrumentation key, and then I need to provide a couple more things. I can say HTTP2 enabled. I can set this of course to true. And what else? And then I need to of course we are running custom runtime, so I need to specify an application stack block, and for this I simply add one value for now. So we use custom runtime. This would be true. And what else can we provide? Maybe I can also provide information about app service logs, and I just provide one variable. This would be of course the retention period. I can set this to 30 days. That's fine. And I can also provide information regarding cores. So allowed origin, I can actually just make this everything for now. And I can say maybe support credentials, I set this to false. I'm just more or less the basics. And of course, you can do some IP restrictions if you're deploying your function into a virtual network, but that's not really our case for now, so that's totally fine. And I'll maybe provide the minimum TLS version, and I can simply set this to 1.2. That's totally fine. Now for the deployment of a file, we would like to create an archive down here. So more or less a pre-process that's going to help us zip our function folder for deployment. So I can create a data section, and I can call this archive file. So this will be of archive file, and can I call this maybe custom function, I don't know, package, something like this. And so provide a few information. So it's going to be of type zip. What else? Source dir is 1, and we are getting this already from function source code path, this one. And output, I don't want our file mode, I want the output path. So again, I'm just going to give this the name of our function. So var.function name, and then .zip. So the function name will be the name of the output file. And what else? I can provide again some exclude section, and here you can actually provide some values you would like to exclude. So for example, if you have, I don't know, for example, if you're working with Python and you work with virtual environments, you might actually have a folder called venv or whatever, but those you can actually provide them here, and they will be excluded when your file is being bundled. Now we can actually come over here, and now we can provide the path to our zip. So this will come from data.archive function package, this one, and we need the output path like this. This is actually more or less all we need for now. Of course, there are a lot more configuration we can make, but for our use case, this should be enough. So again, we have here our resource group, storage account, inside service plan, and then our function. Then this here over here more or less is to help us with a pre-process to zip our file into a zip, and then provide the path that gets uploaded to, again, inside the storage account over here for our function to have access to our function files. And the last thing we would want to do more or less over here would be to provide some output variables. So this is actually where we decide like to put out a couple of informations that we'll find useful, and this could be our function URL after deployment. So we can quickly do that. I can call this function, actually don't need this, I only need the function. I call this function function hosts name, something like this. Again, the value would come from our window function. Where is it? And we need the default host name. That's more or less the only output we'll be needing, and I think we are done actually. One thing we can also quickly do might be to just format our code, and we can simply say Terraform FMT and do a recursive format, and it should be able to format all our files for us. And now everything should be looking good. So the next thing we can now do more or less is define our main, our outputs, and of course the variables that need to be provided when anyone wants to use this resource. And now what we have to do is more or less try to use this resource and see how that goes. And to do that, I'm just gonna, in the root here, create a file called main.tf, and there are a couple of things I would like to provide here. I will not be adding a backend because again, I would like to keep this as simple as possible. So the would be storing our state file locally, so there'll be no need to store this in the cloud. So I'm going to create a Terraform block, and in here I will provide required providers, and here I would like to of course I would be needing the resource manager. So this we'll get this from HashiCorp. I hope I typed that right, and Azure RM, so for our resource manager. And the next thing I need to provide will be a version, and I can try to be brave and go for 3.8. I think that's what I'll be needing here. And for Terraform, what did I do? For Terraform, I need required version. For Terraform, I would need to go upwards of 1.0.11 because this is what I have locally. But this should be fine. Also for any version above of this one, that should be totally fine. And other than this, I need to provide a provider block, and here I call this RM, so more or less befitting to what we have provided over here. And for this provider, I need to provide a couple of important information. So one will be our subscription ID. So this will be to the subscription where I am deploying this. Sorry, of course not inside our feature block. It's not inside our feature block, it will be for the provider itself. So subscription ID, I'll provide this later, of course, of camera, so I don't compromise my credentials. I need to provide a client ID. I'll provide a client secret and a tenant ID. And that's more or less what I'll be providing. Then I'll try to format this again. And I think I have to go out one layer and then format again. So this should be fine. Okay. And again, I'll provide this information of camera just so I don't compromise my credentials. So I need to create a data block. This will be for my client config. So Azure Resource Manager client config, and I can simply just call this current, and I'm not just leave this empty for now. I'll leave this empty for now. That's totally fine. So I think this is all we need more or less to actually use and test the module that we created. And of course, what I might want to do would be to again, like I said, not bother about storing our resource, our state file in the cloud, for example. And that's also why I'm not providing a backend. But again, that should be totally fine for what we're trying to do. And now I have to create a model section, and this is where I'll try to use the model we created. I can give this a name. I can call this Rust function. And so very important things are, the first thing I would want to provide, of course, will be the source. So this will come from our function Rust, and now it's going to complement because it will need us to provide all those variables we specified in here. This is more or less trying to invoke a function, and then it's complemented because we have to provide all of those arguments if that's most convenient for you, that we need to provide. So one of them will be location, and I will set this to West Europe because I'm in Germany. And the next will be function name. I can give it something quite straightforward. So I say Rust Func, maybe 001, something like this. And you have the prefix, and I can call this easy dev. And environment, I can call this test for now. That should be okay. Resource group name, I can call this like easy dev rg for resource group. And the last one would be function source code path, and then this would be inside this folder called function, the one we prepared over here. So I try to format this one more time, and everything is looking good. And then so this should be able to use the module we created over here the same way you would reuse a function. So if we wanted another function, for example, we can actually implement it in the logic just so that we can provide a count. But if we want to use this module to deploy a different function, all we need to do is copy this, provide different parameters, and then we will be able to reuse this module to create a different Azure function resource. And now I would like to provide an output. So this would the only thing I would like to be the output of our deployment will be the function URL. And just so we don't have to leave the terminal, try to go to the Azure terminal, Azure console to try to find the URL of the function we just deployed. So the output is just going to spit it out for us, and then we use it and test our resource creation. So I can come over here to outputs, and I can give it a name. I can call this function URL, and the value would come from our module Rust function app host name. This is exactly what we need. So in the end, it's just going to output function URL in the console and give us the URL of the function we just deployed. So if everything goes as expected, we should be able to plan and then deploy. So I can simply say, of course, we need to first initialize this. I can simply say Terraform init. But before I do that, I'll need to again, of course, come over here and provide these values. So I'm just going to pause the video for a minute and then provide these credentials, and then we can continue. And now I've provided the credentials. I can simply say Terraform init, and maybe I close this part, so just so we see what we're doing, and we'll give it a couple of seconds for it to initialize. And now initialization is done, and now we can plan, and the plan is going to show us the changes that will be made when we make our deployment. And when we do plan and deploy, for example, it will of course always ask us to approve by typing yes into the terminal if we are okay with the changes that will be made. If you are not okay with having to type this all the time, you can simply add an auto approve command, and then it will not have to ask you this all the time. So if I go to, for example, try to do Terraform deploy, it will ask, if I hit enter right now, it's going to ask me after a while if I'm okay with this, but I can simply say auto approve, and it's not going to ask me. Just going to go ahead and do this straight up without asking me anything. Yes, of course, Terraform apply, and it should be able to plan as well as apply our changes. And so again, we give that a couple of minutes, if not seconds, to complete. So if we look over here, it's of course first starts with creating our resource group, because the resource group is going to function as a container that's going to hold everything together. And once the resource group is created, it's going to go ahead and then create all the other resources that need to be created in that. So here you see like the app service plan, the insights, storage accounts, and as the case may be, most of them are actually being created and some have been completed, as you can see over here. So we'll give it a couple more seconds and everything should be fine. So the deployment has been complete, and then if you look over here, like we've asked, we have our output that tells us the function URL. Again, if you look in the outputs that we created over here, it was actually called function URL, and that's exactly what we see down here. And then of course, to test if everything was as expected, we can just copy this URL and clear the string, and then we'll make a call request to this endpoint. It's going to be this /API and then /health, and this should still work as expected. And we can simply just of course append this with HTTPS. So I can say HTTPS, and then this should still be fine. And then again, like we did before, we can pass a name. I'll call this Tony, And then we get hello Tony, blah blah blah. So this was really a quick one, and of course, as you can see, this is like a really handy way to deploy Azure Functions in Rust. Of course, Rust has been gaining some popularity over for the last few months and years, and Azure has also, of course, taken the initiative more or less to provide the opportunity for developers to be able to run like custom runtimes, and of course giving the developer the opportunity to develop functions in languages of choice. And I also love working with Rust, so I'm like, of course, why not try to use it to develop Azure Functions. So this is really something you could more or less use as a template if you happen to have to deploy functions, whatever as the case may be. And of course, maybe in the future, I really hope to do like a series as it pertains to Rust. And so we will not only then be deploying like a function, like a single standalone function, but it's going to be like a full-blown application that's going to have that's going to be a multi-tiered application. So it's probably going to have like up to three tiers, and we would have a lot of resources in there. Would have databases, would have servers, containers, and of course, it's all going to be defined like a really clean architecture, as you would for a real life application in an organization. And then it's not going to be just an Azure function, but then we'll have like a lot of maybe tens, if not up to 20 resources that will be needing to deploy using Terraform. And then you can more, of course, have the idea of how you can actually structure your infrastructure as code using Terraform, and then more or less harness it in such a way that it can be a lot easier for you to collaborate with other developers. Anyways, that will be it for now. Again, we try to deploy our function using Terraform to Azure Cloud, and I would provide a link to this solution as a GitHub repository, so that you can maybe reference it in the future as a template should you want to, or maybe have a question in the future and you would hope to have like a starting point to start working with ISC using Terraform. Anyways, that will be all for today, and as always, I hope to see you next time. Of course, if you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel, and of course engage with me. If anything was not clear, please feel free to leave me questions, and I would get back to you as quickly as possible. Until next time, have a lovely evening, and bye bye.